Okay, test. Can you all hear me? Sort of, not really. Is that on? We're good? Okay, if folks want to take a seat, we are going to start. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out on kind of a little rainy evening. So very much appreciate that. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that working all right? Yes? Okay. So I'm Bruce DeGennaro, and my role here is as a neutral facilitator. So in that capacity, I'm going to just run the meeting, manage the meeting, make sure we stay on time, stick to the agenda, and help just facilitate the conversation as needed. So that's my role here. I've had the pleasure of working with several of you that are in the room, residents of Buxton and Hollis, that came together, volunteered their time to serve on a decommissioning committee. So over the last couple months, we've had a few meetings. We'll talk about that in the presentation. But appreciate the committee's time, and that's been a pleasure to work with that group. And I look forward to working with all of you here tonight as we kind of do this public meeting. Public meetings are only good if the public shows up, and so thank you so much for showing up. I really, as I said, appreciate your time very much. That's why we're here, is to engage with you all. So thanks for making the time to be here. I think with that, let's see, I'm going to go to the objectives and just talk about what we want to try to accomplish in the meeting tonight. There's 3 objectives. They're on the agenda that you picked up. They start with just some background and understanding on the overall decommissioning process and an update on where Brookfield is on that process. That just helps to set the stage so you all can kind of understand where things sit in that overall process. From there, we'll move on and we'll talk about some studies that have recently been completed and a draft study report that's out for your review, for public and agency review. I'm just curious if how many folks, if you want to raise your hand, were here or part of the public meeting that happened in 2002 as part of the study plan process?
2022, right?
I'm sorry, 2022. Sorry, not 2002, 2022. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so that helps me get a gauge because there was a lot of background information given there, but obviously a lot of you weren't there, so this will be a good opportunity to kind of catch up. But I partly mentioned that because that was at least the start of this journey, and the report that we're going to talk about tonight, that was part of a scoping process to decide what studies should be done to develop the information that then is now available in this report. So we just want to set some context there. And then the third major objective, last but certainly not least, is to hear from all of you and provide an opportunity for you to provide comments, particularly on that report. That's really what we're here to do, is to provide an update on the process and to provide an opportunity for you to give us some initial feedback on that draft study report. Recognizing that it was only released a week ago, several of you maybe haven't really had a chance to get into the report. There is a 45-day comment period, so you have until early December to submit written comments, so I don't want you to in any way feel like this is your only opportunity. But we will prioritize comments on the report first, and then we'll make opportunities as time allows for other questions about the decommissioning process. But we really want to get that input on the report. And to the point of comments, hopefully you all talked to Hannah or David when you came in. If you do want to make a comment, we're asking you to fill out a comment card so we know, and put your name on the card so I can call on you, and you can come up here and make the comment. We'll prioritize the comments on the study report first, and then we'll go to comments or questions on the overall process and the timeline, things like that. So if you didn't fill out a card and you want to speak, please do that. And then we're going to kind of sort those cards. We're asking you not only put your name on there, but indicate what you want to talk about in general, so we can kind of combine like things just to be efficient with our time. Okay? So I think that's all I need to say about that. Depending on how many of you want to speak, we may have to limit the amount of time just so we don't run too late. I'm going to target getting you out of here at 7:30 as the agenda has it. If there's a lot of comments, we can go a little bit longer. I don't want to keep you too long, but we can kind of gauge that once we get a sense for how many cards, how many of you want to speak. All right? And then I guess the last thing I'll say, I'm going to turn it over to Kayla here in a minute, and a few other people that are going to run through a presentation, a series of slides. And I'm just going to ask to please hold your questions, and then at the end of the presentation, if we have a little time, we can take a few questions of a clarifying nature. So if there's something that was mentioned on a slide you didn't understand, we'll make a little time for that. But I also want to make sure we leave time for the comments and people that, those of you that want to speak. Okay? I should have mentioned exit the way you came in. There's bathrooms over here. If you need anything of a kind of logistical nature, just let me know. I'm happy to help. All right? Any just burning questions before I turn it over to Kayla? Okay. Kayla, floor is yours. And the agenda has the folks that are going to speak, and so if you're curious, keep track there.
I'll try. All right, there we go. Let's see. All right, first off, thank you for hosting us in this beautiful new building. The paint is still fresh, I can smell it. So my name is Kayla Poquette, Director of Asset Management with Brookfield White Pine Hydro. I've been with the company since 2016. I've been with the Bar Mills decommissioning project since the start, so I've been at all of the public meetings and really with the project since the inception. My teams are in charge of dam safety, compliance, and capital projects for all of Brookfield's assets in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Just as a quick reminder, Brookfield's Saco River footprint includes hydro stations at Hiram, Bonnie Eagle, West Buxton, Skelton, and Cataract. So just some context there. Again, we really appreciate the strong turnout and continued participation from both the towns of Buxton and Hollis, the decommissioning committee, and all of you who have followed the process to date. So as Bruce said, tonight's meeting is really about sharing what we've learned to date through the draft study report and showing how that information will guide our next steps in developing the decommissioning plan. I want to remind everybody that public input is a central part of this process, so we welcome questions, comments, and suggestions, and everything that we discuss tonight will become a part of the public record and will help shape our final plan. All right, so this image here, we wanted to show you guys just as a quick overview of the timeline of Bar Mills. So starting with the commercial operation date of the station, 1958 is when it went into commercial operation. Hummed along beautifully until 2017. At that point, we shut the station down due to issues with alignment, due to concrete reactivity. Essentially, the units were out of alignment, and it was going to take significant capital investments to operate them again. So we made a decision to keep them down. At the same time, fish passage requirements at Bar Mills and really up the entire Saco River drove us to take a really hard look at what the overall capital investments were at the facility and what our long-term strategy was for operation or non-operation at the facility. We determined at that point that the most practical and responsible long-term solution was decommissioning. In 2020, we issued our notice of intent to surrender to FERC. In 2022, as Bruce mentioned, we held public meetings. we issued our draft and final study plans. In 2023 and 2024, it took us 2 years to complete our studies that we proposed to you all due to a number of things related to river flows, weather, etc. So we completed those and put everything together to get us to today. So the draft study report brings all of that work from 23 and 24 together. It's out for public comment and agency comment as well. We'll take all of that information and looking forward, we'll take that input and prepare a detailed decommissioning plan and surrender application for FERC. We're targeting 2026. Pending approvals from FERC and other agencies, we're anticipating as soon as 2027, we could go to construction. It could last, we're thinking, anywhere between 6 months to a year to complete whatever plan we end up having authorization to proceed with. So while we are several steps into the process, there are still multiple opportunities for the public to review and provide feedback before any final decision or construction takes place. I also want to mention that we've been fortunate to work with the decommissioning committee made up of residents and representatives from both towns. Since August, the committee has met 3 times to review preliminary findings and raise important questions to us. Their input has been instrumental, and the collaboration will continue as we move from the study phase into the planning phase. All right, next slide. So these 2 images show what our removal options look like in a nutshell, and we'll get more into it. So based on feedback from the public, from you all, after our initial proposal, the draft study report that we're presenting you today includes an evaluation of 2 removal options. So one of them, let's see, so it'll be your left. The partial spillway removal includes removing the western half of the dam, the spillway, from the canal gates to the log sluice near the mid-river. The right-hand picture shows the full spillway removal option. That includes removing the entire spillway from the canal head gates all the way across the old Rogers fiber mill. I want to note that in both options, the canal will be dry, and we'll get further into that as well in the presentation. Both options will restore a more natural flow through this section of the Saco River. Another note, we do recognize that both the powerhouse and the fiber mill are important topics for the towns of Buxton and Hollis, and both raise valid questions about long-term stability and safety. The fiber mill will continue to be evaluated as part of our decommissioning plan, and we look forward to ongoing coordination with both towns on the topic. However, it is important to note that the powerhouse has been excluded from our current decommissioning proposal and will remain a BWPH asset preserved for potential future use and redevelopment opportunities. With that, go to the next slide. So to summarize, the report is about understanding the conditions on the ground today. So the decommissioning plan, our next step we will bring forward, is based on sound data and local input. So I'm going to turn things over to Ryan Netto, who is going to be operating as project manager. He is our technical manager at Brookfield, and he'll highlight some of our ongoing committee work. All yours.
All right. Thanks, Kayla. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Netto, as Kayla mentioned. I was born and raised in Maine. I live just outside of the Bangor area. I am a technical manager now with Brookfield. I started with Brookfield back in 2017, and I oversee the capital and major maintenance projects for the company in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. For this project in particular, the bar mill is decommissioning. I'm assisting with managing the consulting, engineering, permitting, and eventually the execution of construction. So over the last few months, Brookfield and the Town Decommissioning Committee have been working closely to review studies, discuss key issues, and gather feedback from the public. To date, there have been 3 in-person committee meetings, 1 in August and 2 in September, to review the draft study report and discuss the decommissioning process. One of these meetings included a site visit and tour of the powerhouse, helping everyone visualize the area and the considerations that go into planning for decommissioning. Summaries of each of these meetings can be found in Appendix A of the draft study report. The committee has been focused on several ongoing discussion topics, as you can see there on the slide. The first one, we have a subcommittee meeting group with representatives from both Buxton and Hollis. We're coordinating a well survey to gather better information on private wells located near the river. Brookfield is working with both towns to distribute that survey and hoping to get that survey out real soon. And Brookfield is committed to mitigating any adverse impacts on wells that are directly tied to the decommissioning. Second, the group has been discussing recreational access. While the original plan proposed extending the existing boat launch in Hollis, the committee noted that this site would be more beneficial to anglers than boaters. Brookfield remains open to exploring alternative public access opportunities that provide greater value to the community, so we're still looking into that. The third bullet there, fire suppression access, has been an important topic. Lower water levels after dam removal will affect existing fire hydrants near the dam, and Brookfield is collaborating with the fire chiefs from both towns to find the best solution for maintaining or replacing critical fire suppression capability and access. And the fourth bullet, regarding the fiber mill, the initial proposal was to leave the site undisturbed to avoid contamination of the river. However, Brookfield is now evaluating opportunities to fill and cap the old foundation in coordination with the town of Buxton. So those conversations are ongoing. On dam removal, as Kayla mentioned there, Brookfield originally proposed a partial spillway removal to maintain depth for fish passage and reduce the risk of disturbing the adjacent Rogers Fiber Mill Superfund site. However, based on public feedback, Brookfield is now reviewing both full and partial removal options. And lastly, in regards to the powerhouse, Brookfield does not intend to demolish the powerhouse. It has been evaluated by an engineer and found to be structurally sound. We are also considering additional measures such as security cameras and vegetative screening to improve security and visual appearance. The consultation process for this project began back in 2022 with agency and public meetings to define the scope of studies. A preliminary draft of the study plan was shared with the committee, and the feedback we received was very helpful. Some of the comments were incorporated into revisions of the study plan, while other suggestions are more appropriate for the decommissioning plan, which we are currently working to begin developing. Field work started in 2024 after being delayed due to unusually high water flows in 2023. And then this year, the committee reviewed those findings, and the draft study report was released just last week to public and agency for review. So in short, there's been a great deal of consultation and collaboration to date, and the draft study report reflects that work. It provides a technical foundation and data that will support development of the decommissioning plan in early 2026. And now I'll turn it over to Kleinschmidt, our engineering consultant, who will highlight key findings of the draft study report. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm Kevin Cooley. I'm an engineer with Kleinschmidt Associates, and the second of 3 bald guys over here to talk to you today. Just happened to gravitate toward that side of the room for some reason. So I want to talk to start with talking a little bit about a hydraulic model that we put together to represent what's going to happen once the dam is removed, to really assess what the water levels are going to be I think that's of major interest, and I think and it's also very foundational to the other studies that were done, right? I mean, the water level with the dam removed is obviously going to change. It's going to go down, and so the model really tells us what's going to happen after that occurs. Our model represents both the partial and the full removal options, so we've looked at both to see what the effects are, and and I just got a couple of slides here that I'll talk about to kind of represent that. So the information that you see here, this stuff is taken directly out of the study report, so it's all right there. It kind of gave you some references too. So the image on the left, though, the top part shows more or less what it looks like now, right? It's an impoundment, and the bottom is showing what the water levels may look like after removal, and it's a little bit grainy because it's taken directly out of our computer model, but really the punchline is it's going to look more like a river, right? It's going to look very much like what the river looks like downstream of the dam. So if you stand on the bridge and you look downstream of of the bridge now, it's quick flowing water. It's very riverine, and that's what the river will look like after the fact. There's kind of two distinct areas that are different upstream of the dam and will be more different after the removal. And so the first half mile upstream of the dam is going to see the most significant impact because that's an area, that area is between the dam and an old set of railroad piers. Those old railroad piers are set on really high ledge, high bedrock in the river. And so just based on the natural topography of the river, the area between the dam and those piers will drop maybe 6 to 8 feet, give or take, and that's some of the information that we're sharing here. And the area upstream of those piers will drop much less. So that area upstream really serves as what we would call a hydraulic control, or essentially it's just what's going to set the elevation of the river upstream of that high bedrock area. So if we look on this slide, and really it's kind of the bottom right-hand picture. If you can see it, it's a little bit hard to see. It's maybe clearer in the study report, but that ledge, that picture is actually taken during a drawdown just from the flashboards on the dam being removed or lowered, and those are only 6 feet, so that might only be a 4 or 5 foot drawdown of the impoundment, and that even in that condition, that bedrock is starting to kind of show itself through the water, and so as the dam is removed and the water level between the dam and this bedrock continues to drop, the area upstream is really not going to drop nearly as much as it is just immediately upstream of the dam. So again, in much of the river, 5 miles or so between Bar Mills and West Buxton is really going to be controlled by that. I won't call it a dam, but that control there at the old railroad piers. And so again, as we looked at studies, wetlands and shoreline erosion and various other things, this is the kind of the foundational information that we use to understand what those effects might be in the future. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to hand it over to the third bald guy, Andy, and talk a little bit about some of the other things in the study report.
Thanks, Kevin. Maybe don't advertise the baldness so much. Hi, everyone. Andy Qua. I've been at the previous public meetings. As we worked through the study planning process, as you've heard several times, there's a lot of information in that study report. Really appreciate, especially the committee, all the time they spent working through those hundreds and hundreds of pages that represent a lot of work that we've done in the field, doing modeling, desktop analysis. So we're just going to touch on some highlights here today, but we encourage you to spend some time with that report. The appendices contain kind of secondary reports. And again, a lot of information, but there's a lot of detail in there that we won't be able to cover tonight. First area to talk about a bit is we did a very extensive shoreline erosion survey during that drawdown that Kevin referenced. And that included the entire length of the impoundment on both shorelines. And we did find some areas that were classified based on standard practice of evaluating slopes and soil types and things of that nature. There are some areas that are potentially subject to erosion under high flow conditions especially, but under the permanent drawdown after dam removal, we expect those areas will revegetate very quickly and get stable very quickly. However, with some other issues raised, including invasive species, that we also did a very extensive survey to locate where those are and what they are, because that information will help will help to inform if any specific measures such as monitoring or shoreline erosion issues need to be addressed later in the process. Agencies will also drive what we're required to do there as well. So this comment period for them will help identify areas they're concerned with. We anticipated there to be a lot of sediment built up behind the dam. So we did extensive methods, including sonar, running a boat up and down that area Kevin was talking about where we expect the most change in water level. We did some level of probing and also underwater video. The photo on this slide is actually right at the face of the dam. And you can see there's primarily just boulders and rocks there. But that information helped inform a study that TRC conducted for us to do some sediment sampling in the areas where some sediment is expected to be present. Of those samples, they didn't find any exceedance of Maine DEP's remedial action guidelines, which is what they compare against to determine what needs to be done with sediments that are removed. TRC did recommend additional sampling prior to the deconstruction because the time frame we're in today for these studies, the DEP and Army Corps will require more sampling closer to the construction period. As Ryan mentioned, we still have some work to do with wells and fire suppression, so I'm not going to spend much time there. But stay tuned for the survey coming from the towns, coordinated by Kleinschmidt and Brookfield. Another area of interest in study planning was looking at phase one environmental information from historic reporting and existing information on the fiber mill, the timber crib dam that is right upstream from Var Mills Dam, and some equipment over at the powerhouse area. Currently, there's no plans for disturbance at those areas with the exception of removal of timber crib sections. But regardless, TRC recommended additional testing in areas that we do decide will be disturbed. Again, that will be required as part of DEP and Army Corps permitting associated with the decommissioning. Fish and water quality, we didn't do any specific studies in the field because there's a vast amount of existing information, both from prior relicensing and ongoing monitoring throughout the watershed. We did look closely at fish passage, as Kayla mentioned. That's one of the big drivers for the proposed render removal. So we used the modeling that Kevin reviewed to look at agency criteria for fish passage design for the migratory species of depth and velocity, and found that under both partial and full removals, those criteria should be met. Concurrent with the shoreline erosion survey and the invasive species survey, our wetlands biologist spent a week out on the impoundment, collecting information on the wetlands, confirming what was documented in Fish and Wildlife Service wetland mapping, confirming types, locations. They determined that there are some nearshore wetlands that will definitely be directly affected and may change in shape and size, but generally function as they do now. The wetlands along the impoundment that are not directly on the edge of the river do receive the majority of their inputs from upland runoff and not influenced as much by the river. And as Kevin mentioned, that upper section, we expect water levels to not drop as much as in that lower 2,000 feet or so. We also surveyed for wildlife, botanical, rare threatened endangered species, oak, swamp oak being one. So we've documented those in the study report as well. So there's a lot of information on that in the report. But generally, those areas are outside what we feel is the area of impoundment influence under normal flow conditions post-removal. We also evaluated recreational use for a couple of years at the sites that are related to the project license as opposed to private access. And something we talked with some committee members had noted that 2023 may have been skewed because of higher water level and flow conditions, but we also collected usage count data in 2024 and found that the sites managed by Brookfield, they certainly are used, but not to capacity. And as Ryan mentioned, original plans were to convert the motorized boat launch to a hand carry facility. But all other facilities, such as the pass on Usher Island and the Portage Trail, will still be maintained by Brookfield post-surrender. And as Ryan also mentioned, other access alternatives are being considered, and that's ongoing. For land use and aesthetics, we did some desktop analysis to characterize what area we think will be affected by lower water levels in terms of kind of a larger area of shoreline in that downstream section. And we developed some renderings from the 3 public vantage points, again, not from private areas, just to get a sense of what we think the river will look like post-removal of the spillway, both partial and full removal scenarios. The last big topic covered by the report is cultural historical resources. Primarily all cultural archaeology resources were studied extensively, and recovery efforts required by the state were performed in the early 2000s, so no additional work was needed there. But we did contract TRC to do a structural evaluation of, of the structures associated with the project. That information was provided to the state historic preservation officer with recommendations that additional historic documentation may be necessary. So that's something we'll need to continue consulting with the state on throughout the process. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's the extent of the presentations we wanted to give in terms of the existing work that's been done and the findings. I want to turn it over to Rini and Mark, and they are two representatives from the decommissioning committee, and welcome them to speak.
Hello.
Well, I meant for this to print out a lot bigger than it did. I'm Rini Lewis. I am a resident of Hollis and one of the members of the decommissioning committee, part of the Hollis side. The committee is comprised of folks from Hollis and from Buxton. So on the committee are Jim Booten, on the Hollis side, Dan Yerumian, Paul Mator, there you are, Terry Walters, and myself. And on the Buxton side, there's Jamie Marshall, David Field, Heath Knight, Cindy Fanning, and Mark Woodruff. It feels like we're sort of like rounding second on this long process that Brookfield has started on the decommissioning and the rescinding of the license. And I just want to touch a bit on what has been going on from the town's input perspective and some of the issues that we have really been trying to bring to the fore and make prominent. So in August of 22, when the original scoping document came out regarding what studies would be done, there was a lot of input from both towns and from some citizens. There was more in 2023 when the draft study plan came out with suggestions, questions, and requests for study on things like the powerhouse, the fire hydrants, full dam versus partial dam removal, the Rogers Mill, recreational access, zoning, and aesthetics. A lot of the items that have been touched on today. A few of the suggestions were incorporated, others, most were not. Brookfield does provide explanations in the appendix of their draft study plan about the ones that they did not incorporate, and it's a good opportunity if you're really having trouble falling asleep to go through that long spreadsheet. The field studies, as noted, were then done in 2024, and then the first draft study report was released in August of 25, and that's when the towns created our joint committee. We have been meeting with Brookfield and its consultants, and Mark and I are going to walk through some of the issues that we identified and we dug into. I do want to note that the meetings were thoughtful, they were productive, they were cordial, and I really think that they elevated and made the town's concerns and priorities very clear to the people who attended for Brookfield and for the consulting firm. They did result in some changes to the study plan, the one that we're all talking about now, but there are a lot of open items that will still need to be tackled, and a 45-day comment period has now opened on the study plan, and the whole decommissioning plan is yet to come. So again, maybe we're not quite rounding second, maybe we're heading into it, but I was never really a baseball player. So Mark and I are going to touch on some of those major issues, and then we'll open it up to the group for questions to Brookfield.
Yep. Thanks, Ray. I'm Mark Woodruff. I'm a resident of Buxton. And what I wanted to draw your attention to first is the primary issues that the committee's been discussing. And if you have the opportunity to do a deep dive into the documents that have been made available online, the one that I would suggest is titled Appendix A, Town Decommissioning Committee Summary, because that's the one that really shines the light on what the discussions were about during those 3 meetings. So there were about 7 primary issues that the 3 bald guys have already touched upon.
I'll bring my hair next time.
Yeah, all right. It's real. Yeah. just to have, got to have some fun with this. So yeah, we've talked about fire suppression and the fact that the dry hydrants aren't going to be operable anymore. So the committee as a whole have been looking at options to see how those are replaced. That's been discussed already. There was some discussion from the residents on the committee from Buxton and also Hollis about the desire for full removal of the dam, the spillway dam. That's been touched on already, but I did want to also highlight that it includes a submerged timber crib dam that's immediately upstream of the dam that you see from the bridge. So that all gets removed as well too if they go with the full removal plan. If it's only a partial removal plan, then only that portion of the timber crib on the Hollis side gets removed. So it is really important to point out that your involvement has helped move the needle, I should say, towards that full removal possibility. Another major topic that we talked about has been the Rogers Fiber Mill. As these guys have said, there's definitely going to be some more discussion about how that plays out, because there are a lot of concerns about what went on 25 years ago when the EPA was here. So both the town and Brookfield have to have some serious discussions about how that's going to proceed. Public access was mentioned. What I wanted to point out there is that there was a subcommittee. A few of us went out and looked at some possible sites for a new boat access so that folks can get to the flat water section of the river. Once the impoundment is gone, then to get upstream from the existing boat launch at the Bar Mills, I'm guessing is going to be impossible. And then also, I wanted to mention that along with public access, one thing that we are concerned about is the hazardous and attractive nuisance features that are out there on the property of the powerhouse and the spillway dam. Those would be accessible to the public. Rainey, you wanted to say more about the canal and the powerhouse?
Sure. So the canal will be dry following the removal of the dams, except for a few times a year. And that was one of the things that we discussed a lot in our meetings and were shown the modeling of. There was some sediment sampling that was done, but not a full environmental review of the ground that will then be exposed. So that was one of the areas where I feel that we made some progress in what was included in the study plan, but maybe not quite all the way there. Once that is ground and not water in the canal, there is the large wall, sort of the dam, that is blocking now that spillway. And so, as Mark was saying, we had concerns about the attractive nuisance and safety thereof. So the canal, for those of us who were concerned that it was going to be a muddy mess, less concerned, but there are still issues that need to be addressed with it. The powerhouse is a significant concern to the town of Hollis. It may not be what happens to the powerhouse in the near future. It may not be the immediate reuse of it, but learning the lesson that Buxton experienced when the Rogers Fiber Mill was eventually abandoned, Hollis remains very concerned about what the long-term plan will be for the powerhouse. So we are appreciative of the discussions that we've had. We understand that there is further use anticipated by Brookfield of that overall property. That remains, I think, for the town of Hollis, an important unclosed item. And then one other item that I wanted to touch on is the survey for the wells that's coming out. I think that the survey scope and the number of properties that will receive the survey is a good example of the working together of Brookfield, Kleinschmidt, and the town as we looked at what properties may be affected and wanted to make sure that the data was available on wells that are within the corridor. I think that there was a really thoughtful, open, and helpful look at it. And so you all will be, those people in that corridor will be receiving a survey to get information on their wells. The survey will come from the towns of Hollis and Buxton. The information will go back to Kleinschmidt for its analysis. But I urge everybody who is on that list and gets it in the mail to please complete it so that we have good data and Brookfield will be in a position to address wells that are affected if there are any. So those were our big items that we concentrated on. There were some we didn't really get to.
Yeah, that's the next part here that I want to draw your attention to is just some examples of items that, because we only had 3 meetings, we never got the chance to talk about these, and it's really no one's fault. That's just the nature of the thing, and the committee members ourselves really prioritized what Rainey and I have been just talking about. But there are some out-of-time issues, I'll call them, that I wanted to touch on. One was cost analyses. Now, I don't believe it's a requirement of FERC to put a cost analysis in the study report. Is that correct? Yeah. But it was a question that the committee members have or had regarding, what's the cost of partial versus full removal? I think Kleinschmidt and Brookfield are looking into that now to get a cost estimates. Was that pretty much what you guys said? Okay, so that's something that we were unsure of. And then regarding the powerhouse, there's it's been said that the powerhouse is not going to be removed. I think the residents of Hollis in particular were concerned that it would be good to know, well, what is the cost of removing the powerhouse? There were some other things, out-of-time issues that I wanted to mention here. One was just the effect of the lower impoundment on the shoreline. There's a couple of concerns there. One was the erosion study. We didn't talk too much about that, but I do have to say it was very thorough how that was conducted. But there was also, I had some conversations with Kayla towards the end of all of this, toward the end of our last meeting, about the additional acreage. Because when you lower the impoundment, now all of a sudden you have more land extending out from the shoreline, from the existing shoreline. So the question came up is, with that additional acreage, will there be some sort of administrative costs for the property owners and the towns, the tax assessors especially? It's just something I have no idea about, and it's better probably answered by a tax assessor. Another item was aesthetics. There was some aesthetic studies done. They were from the bridge, looking at the powerhouse and looking at the dam, but there was no vantage point, I should say. There was no vantage point taken from the river or from Salmon Falls Road on the Buxton side, looking at the powerhouse, looking at that remaining structure. So there were some concerns there. And then finally, it's been touched on, the historic designation of the remaining structures. Kayla and I had a quick conversation about this too. It's just unclear what you guys are after with that by designating something that's going to be torn down, maybe. I don't know. But some clarity on that, I think, would be helpful. So then, just to wrap up here, I want to point out some very important next steps for the community.
Can I add one other?
Yep.
I think one of the points that was made, and I just don't want to not note it, we did bring up at, I think in our final meeting, depending on the timing that all of this takes, If this work is done in 2027, if that were to occur, that also is when the Salmon Falls Bridge is being replaced, and all of the traffic will be going through, a lot of traffic, sorry, DOT would argue that not all, I'm sure.
It might be, so if I can
Yeah,
interject, like, we would definitely coordinate with the DOT regarding that, absolutely, yeah.
Perfect.
100%.
Yeah.
They would have to buy in on everything, so. and
Maybe you
it's
can
not
convince them of
uncommon.
some other stuff while you're
Right,
at it.
yeah, so, yeah.
Like that was,
Okay.
You guys
Meanwhile.
have driven through Winslow Waterville lately, that bridge that they're replacing
Yes, I
down
know.
there? Like, we've had years of meetings with them about that bridge replacement, so don't worry about that. Yeah, 100%.
got it.
So I don't want to take up any more of your time because it's your questions that are coming up, but I do want to really emphasize quickly here that, you know, there are some important next steps that start tonight and continue over the next 45 days of the comment period. And in making your comments, please consider the following. Please describe your unique concerns or your on-the-ground experience. Identify information or data that you feel is missing from the report. Ask questions about the results or the conclusions that are unclear to you. That's a key one, I think, because I've been approached by some people who've said, I don't have a clue about these scientific reports. Help me out here. So please ask the experts. And then, if you can, provide specific facts, photos, or data to support any relevant issue you have about the decommissioning. Send those comments to Brookfield or Kleinschmidt. Send copies of your comments to the town. And if you want to go a step further, send them to FERC so it's on the record with them. And then please participate in the decommissioning plan. Thanks for your time.
Okay, well, thank you, Rini and Mark and the rest of the committee. Really appreciate all the input and the dialogue. I do think was very constructive, and I learned a lot. So we're doing good on time, and I only have 3 cards. And so what I'd like to suggest is make the space for those 3 folks that would like to speak. I don't have names on here, so I'm just going to read enough of the comment to figure out who wants to speak when. And then, once those folks have made their comments, then we have time to kind of open the floor. If you have questions about any of the information that you heard, either from this table here or from Mark and Rini, I'm happy to entertain questions with the remaining time that we have. So, I'm just the first one here is asks about providing full details on the entire removal. So I don't know who made that, but whoa, it just got really loud. So if you want to make any further comment about that, or we can just try to give some more background, I'm not sure. So the individual made this comment, provide full details on entire removal and return to natural state, including canal area. Maybe the question's been answered by the presentation. Yeah.
I wrote that question.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this earlier, all of this is being live streamed, so if you don't mind coming up here to state your comment, that would be helpful for the recording. Thank you. Yeah, just right here. This mic seems to pick up pretty well, so anywhere in here is good.
Rita Bradbury from Hollis. I live along the river, and I'm concerned about how much of the dam is actually being removed. And I know you gentlemen have talked about some of the details, and I know the report gives all of the details. I'm sorry, I haven't read it. But what I'm particularly concerned about is bringing the river back to its complete natural state, as natural as can be. And, you know, just the fact that you've considered going from a partial removal to a full removal is a grand idea, and I hope it goes that way. And I hope that everything behind it starts flowing naturally again, and it doesn't become a barrier for safety for our towns. So I'm a strong advocate for that. But my main question was, I did not hear the details about, Rainey started to talk about the canal area, and I know even there, I haven't heard anything about the walls being removed and trying to restore it into a natural geographical shape and form, and, you know, not making it a liability to people in the town who may cross into that area. So that's my question, is especially about the canal, walls removal, any walls removal that have to do with damming, because if damming is not occurring, I think everything should look natural, so I don't know if you can address that.
Great, so I think if, Kevin, if you want to just try, I mean, while we're all here, and the question's been asked, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but Kevin can maybe provide a little more information that would be helpful to answer that question.
So we put this picture at the end here just to be able to address questions kind of like this, and give a little bit of a understanding of the site. And unfortunately, my laser doesn't work on the TVs, so I can't point to things very well. But
Kevin, I can try to point.
yeah, I would go up there and point, but I'm afraid you might not be able to hear me. So if you point to the headworks structure right there at the head end of the canal, so that area, that structure will be removed. So that is part of the removal, regardless of partial or full. And so that's what keeps water out of the canal if the gates are closed now. Moving downstream and then to Bruce's right, just at the very upper end, upstream of the bridge, there's a canal spillway that will be removed. So that's coming out. And while we're right there, what's going to change, what's going to be new there actually is a short diversion wall that we're calling it, to keep water out of the canal. So that's going to help keep the canal dry. That's not going to be a very tall structure. We're not trying to rebuild a new dam. So it's going to keep flows, that are normal out of the canal and keep the canal dry. High flows, so maybe in the spring and in the fall when we get high flows from rains and runoff, the canal will have water in it. So the water it'll wet the canal kind of gradually, not real fast. It's just going to seep over that short 3 or 4 foot high wall. It'll wet the canal. And then flowing downstream from there to the powerhouse spillway, which right now is intended to remain, there's an opening in that spillway right now. It's covered. It's got a gate over it. We're going to take that gate out of it, so that'll let the canal drain. So anything that goes into the canal is going to flow out of that canal and let it drain. The powerhouse will stay. Now, one thing about the canal, that's a man-made excavated structure. That's not part of the natural river. So, and it's quite voluminous if you think about trying to fill it in. So there's no intent to fill it in, but and we're going to dispose of some of the rubble from the dam within that, and then cap it over, and the canal will essentially revegetate in a natural state. So it won't be and we're going to shape it so it'll drain, so we don't get standing water, so it won't be a mosquito pit and things like that. So that's the intent for the canal in a nutshell.
So are the walls in that second area between the bridge and the powerhouse, there's cement walls, are those going to be removed?
Those will not be removed.
Below, so if you're looking north and south of the bridge.
Yeah.
Down in there. So there's cement walls in there.
Yeah, none of that's going to be removed. Yeah.
Why? Why should those be left behind?
That's the plan right now, is to
So we're excluding the powerhouse from our decommissioning plan. So to restore the river, this restores the river.
Correct.
So we're excluding the powerhouse
Right.
to reserve that for future potential use. So this all stays.
Why?
Because it's like this isn't needed to restore the river right here.
You don't need those cement walls that the powerhouse around.
Yes.
Why?
Because this maintains the level. I mean, I'm not saying the powerhouse is gonna run, But like technically, this spillway maintains the elevation for the powerhouse to run.
Not that spillway, just above it, right there, right there. There's cement all along there, both sides.
Like the canal walls itself.
There's a
right?
little bit there, but it's not, it's, you know, it's exposed bedrock there too, yeah.
There's cement walls that will put there.
That's right. Understood. I understand where you're coming from.
For the purposes of tonight, I mean, thank you for your comment, and, we'll take note of that and work that into the discussion. All right, so just in the name of kind of making time for others, because I did get a few more questions. The next one I have, again, I don't have names on all of these, so there was a question about toxic barrels being buried under the dam, and apparently there's a, I don't know if you call it a rumor or concern so that, you want to mention what that's about?
Sue Schaller, I'm a resident of Buxton. I wasn't here for the Superfund site, but every time we have one of these meetings, there's parking lot conversation about what about the buried barrels of toxic waste in the riverbed? And I would love it if somebody would put this to rest, because I can't imagine that the Superfund site left barrels buried in the riverbed. Maybe there's something in the fiberboard concrete foundation that's on dry land. But if somebody could address this and settle it, because I always hear this as parking lot questions. Thank you.
I'll do my best. I don't know of anything, that relates to barrels or anything else that's buried. I know that from the research that's been done as part of this, the EPA started the process. The documentation indicates that they ran out of money and basically kind of capped the site, if you will, and left it in that state. Now,
In the river or in the foundation?
no, downstream of the foundations. So it would be in, I'm going to walk over your point to it. It'd be in this area, downstream of these foundations. That's the area that was, they got as far as they could and ran out of money and left and capped it. As far as any buried barrels or anything else, we have no information, based on the research that's been done that indicates there's anything buried there. Now, some of the soil that's in that area could be contaminated with material, which is one of the reasons why we don't want to touch that area. That's not the intent, regardless of if it's a full removal or a partial removal. That area downstream of there is not going to be touched. So, but I can't say, because I can't prove a negative, but I really can't imagine that there are buried barrels of waste in that area that the EPA left. But I can't prove a negative, so I can't say for sure.
I guess I would maybe add,
You should go, just because of the recording.
as we prepare our decommissioning plan and as we eventually get to construction, any plans that we move forward with will have to go through federal, state, local permitting. And that would come out in the wash, right? Like the DEP, the main state DEP, everybody will want to have a say in that, right? And the EPA was involved, there is documentation. There will be eyes on this, just if that makes you feel any better. Now, I can't stop the parking lot talk, and I can't, but I can tell you that we will be required to fully permit this project.
So what you're saying is, there are records at DEP that will be part of the process
Yes.
that address this?
Absolutely, and the EPA, the feds, the state, local, yes, absolutely. So, yeah. Yeah.
That's another issue.
Right.
I don't know if we're
So,
going to solve
yeah.
that tonight. Thanks, Kayla, and thank you for your comment. So I have another question about the canal, so I'm just going to try to bunch these up a little bit. So this is from, is that Catherine? They had a question about vegetation, plans for vegetation, subject to yearly flooding. Did you want to mention that, or you want to just try to address it? That's totally. I am going to ask you to come up here if you're going to speak, just so that we get. Thank you.
I'm on the Conservation Commission. I'm just curious about the plans to revegetate the canal, or is it, you're using it for a site for depositing the rubble from the dam and letting it grow back naturally? You're not planting anything? You're just letting it happen on top of the rubble that maybe you're capping with something, or just more details on that?
Yeah, I would say that the details aren't fully fleshed out on that, but, so any rubble that's put in there, which would be concrete debris and stone debris, would have to be capped, right? And it'll eventually have to have loam on the top of it. Anything that's loamed will have to be seeded, mulch, stabilized. What we seed it with, is probably to be determined. It won't be just grass, it'll be some sort of, some other mix. As far as the center part of the canal that is kind of currently, covered with silt, which will be a good seed bed for vegetation. That's the part that I think still remains, that we have to figure out as far as the decommissioning plan, what we're going to do to revegetate it. I think some of it will very quickly, if we left that, it would revegetate very quickly, very naturally, but there may be in that particular area some additional seeding that might need to be done to make sure that comes back quickly enough to satisfy. Because it's going to be disturbed too, because there'll be trucks driving in and out of it, because we're going to have to dump the material. So, I think that by itself probably points us to the point where we'll need to have some revegetation in there. Again, what that is, it'll be some sort of seed mix, probably more so than trees or things like that.
There is a lot of Japanese knotweed right adjacent to that.
There is right now.
Very happily take it over.
Absolutely, yes, there is, right on the bank, yeah. Right.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. All right, so I have another card that doesn't have a name, but it says, any concerns from Department of Inland Fisheries? So do you want to speak to that? Just what it says. Oh, just what it says. Okay, so. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, any concerns from the Department of Inland Fisheries? Question.
We'll know during this report.
I think that's it. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife is definitely going to be part of it. They have been. They've been part of the prior, the study planning process. They'll be part of the permitting process. They'll be, hopefully we'll get some comments from them on this one, on this report. So, so Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, Maine DMR, Department of Marine Resources, other agencies as well. Those are both fisheries agencies.
Thanks, Kevin. And looks like we have a comment from Lars Hammer, who's at the Maine DNR, so not Inland Fisheries, but another state agency. So.
Hey everyone, Lars Hammer with the Maine Department of Marine Resources. So I'm going to have a bunch of different comments and questions, but I'm just going to keep it short for tonight and have one comment and one question. So generally, I found that there was potentially some information that was missing, as well as some possible errors within the report that will probably make it difficult for my agency and the public to adequately review the report. And one of those, probably the biggest one from my perspective, is in relation to fish passage. Tonight we heard that fish passage would be possible under a variety of velocities and depths at the project, under both the partial and full removal scenarios. However, if you go into page 84 of the report, you'll see that the estimate of passage efficiency is 90% for American shad, 65% for blueback, and 37% for alewife, all target fish species that should be able to pass this project. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that fact, and I think that it would be behoove Brookfield to have that information right up at the front in the executive summary instead of at page 84 where I happen to find it. So my question is there an opportunity for comments like that, more about the form of the document? Is there an opportunity for comments like that to be given prior to the end of this comment period, such that our agency and the public can adequately review this document?
So you want to see the report revised prior to the comment period
Correct.
ending?
Correct.
Even though the data won't change, the information won't change, it's just an organizational change?
Yes, so I think there could be some additional data that would be helpful, like flow duration curves would be great to see. For
You're going to follow up in an email, right?
Sure, yeah, happy to do so. I have a list. I can definitely follow up with an email, but there's a number of things that would be great to
I think
include if
we
possible.
talk about, I'm not sure about the organizational thing, you don't have me
Sure.
sold on that. But I think if there's additional data your department needs to see, we'll definitely accommodate that.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
That's your only question?
For now. I think he's reserving. Okay, so I have one more card from Paul. So, oh, there he is. I was looking over here because the rest of the committee's over here.
I'm Paul Mator, for those of you who don't know me. I guess if you know me, then you might have other names for me. I've been following this for a long time, and I grew up in this area, and probably everywhere there's a sign that says "Don't," I did. The most beneficial thing about this is going to be freeing the river, and I'm a huge advocate for open rivers and removing dams. I think this is a fantastic thing that's going to be done. And I realize that the powerhouse is out of the scope of the project. Leaving it or taking it out has nothing to do with the purpose of the project to free the fish, which is the number one benefit that's going to come from this. However, leaving the powerhouse also leaves the town of Hollis with a potential bill to remove that for the people who own it, who decide that they don't wish to pay the taxes anymore and give the keys to the town and say, this is your problem. And I think that can't be overlooked. I don't think it does us any good to second guess whether that powerhouse actually has any utility to Brookfield or not, or whether the utility is in the money saving by leaving it and pushing the cost of removing it to the future, or maybe, whatever happens to it. This is not these people who will be making that decision. They'll be all retired by the time that it comes around for the town to foot the bill to remove it. I don't see that it's beneficial for us to push for them to remove it as part of this project. But I do see some benefit to having some surety from them for removal in the future. I think our way out would possibly be for the select board, town manager to strongly consider if we can impose a demolition bond with this approval, some way to defer the cost and make them responsible in the future for this, because it is theirs. And I cite an example. It's not law that would apply to this, but the principle is in our zoning ordinance, where if you were these solar fields that they've built around town, when we give approval, when the planning board has given approval to those, they come with a demolition bond, which protects the town in the future, 20, 30 years, when the system stops functioning. They can't just give the keys back to the town and say, sorry, we don't want this anymore. It costs us more to demolish this than the property is worth. So we'll just stop paying our taxes and let the town foreclose, which is required by law. So the town would have to take it. If whoever owned this in the future, some vulture fund for, assets that don't produce anything that they see no value to in the future, it gets just shucked off, and Brookfield no longer even owns it. Whoever that owner is in the future could give this to us and give us this burden. So I think it's very important. By far, the most significant aspect of this project is them leaving the powerhouse for the town to be responsible for in the future. So that's my piece. Thank you for listening.
All right, so I did get one more question from gentleman over here. Do you want to come up and, or do you want me to just read it? Okay. So it says partial or full removal. Will either town have any budget costs for any type of maintenance or upkeep? That's a question, i.e. the power station. So is there a cost to the town for maintaining facilities that are left? I guess would be another way to rephrase that. So carry on.
We don't anticipate there being any maintenance burdens on the town after the spillways, partial or full removal. No. Were there any, was there something specifically that who asked the question? That you were concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, who's going to do the maintenance?
Brookfield, we will own it, still, just like we'll own all of the other facilities on the Saco. We own Fort Halifax on the Kennebec, which was decommissioned in 2013, 2009 maybe? I get my years wrong. So we still maintain that facility, and it has been decommissioned, let's call it 20 years. So yeah, it's been 20 years. So we will own it, we will maintain it, it will need to remain structurally sound, we'll make sure it's fenced, safe, all of those things. We are still gonna be operating on the Saco River, we wanna be good neighbors. We live here, our ops managers, our ops teams, we're here, we wanna be a good teammates, so.
Terry.
Good evening, Terry Walters. I was one of the members representing Hollis on the decommissioning. And full disclosure, I have full head of hair, but it was brown before I started this. But I want to thank everybody involved. It was a very good process. The first meeting, we all kind of eyeing each other. Here's Brookfield, the corporate people, and here's Kleinstein, the supposed environmental experts, and here's the rest of us representing the town. But I really think having the local input helped. I think Brookfield did listen to a lot of our concerns. Maybe I'm naive or just overly optimistic, but I think they want to be good neighbors. As Rainey said, we're about at second base. We got a long ways to go. But I hope that the process continues and that we can continue with discussions and conversations. Negotiation is much better than litigation. And if we can work together, you're never going to make everybody happy with everything. That's life. But I think we can have a very good resolution to this that's going to put the towns in a good position. So I hope we can continue to work together in some format, either through the committees or through the selectmen, but I don't think it'd behoove us to get into a big protracted litigation. Let's just try and work as neighbors and resolve these issues. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll just say, we have 10, 15 minutes, so I'm happy to entertain more comments and questions.
Tim Johnson. My question is, when you talked about where the EPA ran out of money downstream of the Rogers Fiber building, with the existing level of the water, does that water now enter that area?
The area downstream?
Correct. No, so with the removal of the dam, there's no way the water can get that high.
Correct.
Okay.
Other than maybe a really large flood.
Well, if it's not doing it now with the dam there.
Right, it would do it now.
Would- oh,
If
that's now.
really high, really high flood, you know, in theory, it could get there, but it's, with the dam removed, it's not gonna be any different in that area.
Thanks.
Right, no, good question.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Lee Klarman, Hollis Conservation Commission. Got two questions. One, we've talked a lot about upstream. Downstream, especially right below, there's a pretty popular recreation area. Do you anticipate any change to that section of the river? And second question, erosion. You touched on that a little bit. You, from what I gathered, anticipate that there will be some impact to erosion. You think it will vegetate pretty quickly. I guess what makes you so confident that will happen, and to the extent of that erosion, I guess a bigger question, if these predictions, any of sort of your predictions, any of the models are incorrect or something changes, what sort of like assurances does the town have that if there are major changes that they can be remedied, or is it sort of like once it happens, whatever may happen is sort of like the town's stuck with?
So as far as your first question, the area downstream, by taking the dam out, really expect nothing to happen downstream. So everything from the toe of the dam on downstream, where there's a lot of tubing and other activities, don't really expect anything to change in that regard. The flows that are there now are going to be there after the dam. It's just really the upstream water levels and things that are going to change. The velocities and what happens downstream is really not going to change at all. As far as potential for erosion on the stream banks upstream, our confidence in the ability for that area to revegetate is high based on our survey. It's a good seed bed. And what we're talking about here is as the water recedes, basically have these kind of shoal areas that the water, and we saw this even with just a 6 foot or so drawdown from the flash bores being down. That area, it's very silty and sandy and very good for revegetation. So we're very confident that that's going to vegetate pretty quickly. And just anecdotally, not to get too far off track, but just last year, 2024, if anybody's familiar with the Presumpscot River, there's the Dundee Dam that's on the Presumpscot River. That impoundment was completely dewatered, and just for a couple of months, and the entire impoundment grew back. It was green, and I won't say the entire because I'm sure there were areas that weren't, but it revegetated very quickly, and that's kind of what we see. You can see the same thing even, and I can't speak to when it happened, but when the Edwards Dam was removed, that area that's upstream of and that's in Augusta on the Kennebec River for anybody that's not familiar, but that area revegetated very well, very much on its own. You can drive over the tall bridge heading to the interstate by O'Connor GMC there, and that's, you can look upstream there, and it's very, very well revegetated. So those are I guess, some of our cues that we think that it's going to revegetate very quickly. As far as what surety, I guess, there is that if something happens down the road, I think that's something that'll come out of the DEP permitting process, really, and DEP may have something to say about that and some sort of comment on that, what might need to happen, but at this point, there's nothing in the plans to provide any sort of surety on, what happens 10 years down the road or something if there's additional erosion. Because so many of those things are natural processes that are hard to control or even predict.
Kayla, did you want to?
I was just looking in the study report, is it appendix Sorry. Is it Appendix B in the study report, it looks like, is erosion, if you want to, Bar Mills website, if everybody's not familiar, there's a website with all of this documentation, and timelines, great past meeting minutes, really good documentation. If you need the website information, let me know. It's a great resource. So Appendix B has erosion data, wetlands data. It's got a bunch of good maps you can look at and see kind of like what we're modeling, what we're predicting. And as Kevin said, like assurances wise, like similar to the wells and the fire hydrants, like Brookfield, we will be obligated to take care, that we won't be able to just leave this in a catastrophic mess. You know, like there will be, we will do it because we're, you know, good stewards of this river, but additionally, like agencies will make sure we do it as well through the permitting process and the decommissioning process. So if that makes you feel any better. So.
All right, we've got a couple more minutes. If does anybody have any other comments or questions? If not, I'm happy to let you go about the rest of your evening, and thank you for coming. Really, it's, as I said at the beginning, public meetings aren't any good without the public, so really appreciate your time. The comment period goes for at least another 30-plus days, so there's more time, and the comment's been made that we're rounding second. There's still a lot more to go, so I hope you'll all stay engaged. Please let us know if you have questions. All right. With that, we're adjourned. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Happy Halloween.